the Blue Yeti has been a staple for so many YouTubers and streamers over the last decade or so. In fact, it was my first purchase when I started making YouTube videos about 5 or so years ago. And in late 2019, they finally created a true upgrade to this in the Blue Yeti X with a more sleek modern design, as well as some LED light indicators to see how loud you are. Compare this to Elgato's Wave 3, which came out in June 2020 alongside the Wave 1. Now, Elgato has been making high-quality streaming equipment for years. In fact, a lot of my setup is actually Elgato products, but they finally decided to jump into the microphone game. So which of these mics is better for you? Let's find out. And as a disclaimer, this is not sponsored in any way. All of these opinions are my own. You may be tempted to skip ahead to the sound comparison, and if you want to do that, you can just skip ahead to right here. But you honestly won't be able to hear much difference because for these higher end USB microphones, you really want to compare the features that one has that another one might not. For example, the 4 different polar patterns on the Yeti, or the extra included software and clip card included on the Wave 3. I will be breaking this up into a few different sections, so if there's something specific you want to see, here's some timestamps for those. Now, starting with the physical portion, both mics are dark, have a volume knob, headphone jack, and removable USB plug. The Yeti also has threading on the bottom for a mic stand. I generally prefer the look of the Yeti X. I think it looks slightly more professional in my opinion, but you might disagree. The Yeti is actually a little over twice as heavy as the Wave 3, and it's definitely a little more sturdy. I do enjoy the simplicity of the Wave 3 base though, as the bottom will just kind of twist off like this, and you're left with just a pretty small mic. So it's definitely a lot more portable this way. And while the Yeti does fold down like this to make it a little more compact, even when folded down, it's still overall a little bit chunkier than the Wave 3 by itself, but it does have these screws here if you want to take it off the base. So first, let's talk about what's good about the Yeti. On the back, you have these 4 different polar patterns that you can swap between by pressing this button on the back. You have bidirectional, omnidirectional, cardioid, and stereo. Cardioid setting is most likely what you're going to be using it for, as it's good for doing single-person audio recordings and streaming because it takes in the sound that's going into it from here. Bidirectional is good for things like podcasts where we have 2 people speaking into the mic. Omnidirectional is good for something like maybe a conference call or when there's just a lot of people around the mic. And stereo is good for when you not only need to convey the sound, but also where the sound is sort of coming from, kind of acting like a pair of ears. I don't know too many uses for it, but it's kind of cool. And if you're watching this, you're probably just going to need the cardioid setting. I rarely use anything else. In fact, I've come across more streamers and YouTubers using the wrong setting on their mic than I have found people using a different setting other than cardioid correctly, if that makes sense. So unless you have multiple uses planned for your mic, you're probably not going to be getting too much usage out of the different settings. The best new feature introduced in the Yeti X is being able to monitor your volume in real time. So as you can see, if I get a little too close to the mic, it gets red, but when I stay kind of this nice distance, it's in the green zone and maybe gets a little bit into the yellow zone as well. This is a great feature because it's not always super practical to have to keep looking over to see what your levels are, and being able to see it right on the mic itself is amazing. Another pro of the Blue Yeti is that, in my opinion, in a controlled environment, I think I can get a better sound on the Blue Yeti X overall than the Elgato Wave 3. It's a very small difference, but for example, if I had to make a YouTube video and had to do a voiceover for it, I would probably just take the Blue Yeti X overall, but it's by a very small margin. It also comes with the Blue software, which you can only use for the Blue microphones, but with it you can add some cool filters to your voice to change it up a little bit. I don't mean like a robot filter or something like that, I'm talking more so like change it to a radio voice or something to get rid of some of the highs and lows, stuff like that. I think it's pretty cool, but I haven't used it too much because what would happen is when I would talk into it and get a little bit quiet, I tend to trail off at the end of my sentences, but it would like cut out some of the words thinking it was background noise. So I would turn up the gain on it, but then it got too loud and started clipping, so I couldn't find that happy medium for the software. I also didn't really have a need to change my voice around, but you might find it a lot more useful than I did. So now, what's good about the Wave 3? Well, there's a lot. My personal favorite is Clip Guard. It's a feature that automatically recognizes when you're getting too loud and adjusts the gain of the mic so you don't start clipping. And if you're not sure what this means, here's an example. Here's an example of me being a normal length away from the mic. For comparison, this is what it sounds like when you're too close to the Yeti X. And this is what it sounds like when you're too close to the Elgato Wave 3. This is a game changer for streamers, and I really hope it becomes a new norm for mics. When I first heard of this, I thought it was a great idea, but I thought it would be a little gimmicky and probably not work too well. I figured they'd have to sacrifice some of the sound quality to get it to do that, but it does a really good job, which I was pleasantly surprised by. You can turn this off in settings if you need to, because for example, if you're someone who gets really loud for these like hype moments, the clipping actually can add to the hype in my opinion. But for non-hype moments like bumping something, coughing, or just being too close to the mic, audio clipping can sound horrible. So I generally would recommend to keep it on. Another great part is the Elgato Control Center. This is something that I wish I could use for all of my mics. It allows you to independently control all sounds and aspects of your stream, sort of acting like a digital Go XLR. This is a fantastic tool for streamers, and it's so simple and useful that it makes you wonder why other mics haven't implemented something similar. And there's also a capacitive touch right at the top to be able to easily mute your microphone. However, I have accidentally bumped it here and there without realizing it and had my mic on mute for a little while, so make sure you don't bump that. Now the 3 in the Wave 3 comes from the 3 different ways you can control it with the knob here. The first is the mic gain, the second is the headphone volume, and the third is the PC and mic monitor. This can allow you to hear yourself louder without actually having to turn up the gain of the mic and have everyone else hear you even louder. And this also works vice versa if you want to hear less of yourself without your audience hearing less of you. And so as you would guess, the Elgato Wave 1, the cheaper version of this mic, only comes with the headphone volume. So here's a quick sound comparison. Here are some statements read with the Yeti X. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Pressed the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. And here are the same statements read on the Elgato Wave 3. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. So now onto the negative aspects of the mics. The Yeti's biggest flaw for me personally was not being able to find gain levels that I was happy with. Now you generally want your mics pretty close to your face on a lower setting so you don't pick up a ton of background noise, so for me I would find myself on the second lowest setting on the Yeti X. However, it would often be a little too quiet, so I would bump it up to the third. But once I was on the third, I would start clipping. So I oftentimes had a lot of trouble finding the happy medium in between the second and third lowest settings, but you might have a little bit more success than I did. Now you can fine tune the levels on your computer, but for me it just seemed like too big of a jump between the levels. But a lot of times when you're streaming, it's kind of hard to fine tune the levels, so at least they have the levels on here so you can see exactly how loud you are. I also don't love the fact that the buttons are clicky. They can be a little bit loud to the audience because it's all internal right there, even though you're not going to be like changing the pattern setting very often or maybe not muting the mic, but it can be kind of loud, so I really don't think that's a great idea to have. I also don't love the micro USB plugin on the Yeti X compared to the USB Type-C on the Elgato Wave 3. The micro USB is really just on its way out, and I'm finding myself having less and less of these cables just lying around, so it's kind of inconvenient for that. Now, cons for the Wave 3. I honestly don't have a ton of them. It generally does a pretty good job for what it was made to do. Now, I don't love the fact that the official pop filter and shock mount are $30 and $40, and like I said before, I can probably get a little bit better sounds on the Yeti X in a controlled setting, but I guess I would say the biggest problem is that it's not super versatile. It's made with streaming in mind, and so if you're not doing that, for example, you have like a podcast with a lot of different people, it's probably not as good as the Yeti X would be for that. And also, you could probably use this a little bit better for instruments or maybe vocal recording like singing. However, you probably would be better off with an XLR mic at that point. So overall, does either mic reign completely supreme? Definitely not. There are tons of different groups that would find better usage out of either mic. If you're using the mic for podcasts or really just need some versatility behind the mic, the Yeti X is probably your best bet. While I personally think that having the 4 different polar patterns is a little bit overrated, it definitely can be useful for a lot of different groups of people. If your primary purpose is just to do audio recordings and you have a very controlled setting, the Yeti X might be your best bet, especially with the Blue software that comes with to kind of fine-tune your voice a little bit. But for me, I didn't find it super useful. So if it sounds like this mic is for you, but budget is still an issue, I'd probably recommend just getting the Yeti and then also getting a pop filter for it. Saving the money over the Yeti X might be worth it. But I think for a lot of people, the slight bump in quality compared to the Yeti, as well as being able to see your audio levels in real time, that might just be worth the upgrade alone. But if you do plan on streaming or really doing anything with variable sound levels, I really gotta recommend the Elgato Wave 3. They definitely made this with the streamer in mind, just like most of their other equipment. It's a fantastic mic for streaming, and at this price point, I couldn't recommend it enough for streamers until you're ready to upgrade to an XLR mic. But honestly, at that point, there's such a diminishing return with sound levels that it might not be worth it. So let me know if this helped you decide what mic to get. I think you should have a pretty good idea of what mic is for you at this point. They're both incredibly solid USB mics, and while they are a little expensive, they're some of your best options around that $150 price point. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Let me also know what you want to see compared in the future. Make sure to like and subscribe, do all those things, and thank you again for watching. Peace.